Hey there, welcome to The Explainer. If you've been feeling totally overwhelmed by the sheer amount of history packed into the years between 1945 and 1991, well, take a deep breath. You're in exactly the right place. I'm going to be your ultimate study buddy today. I've gone ahead and distilled all those messy class notes, timelines, and vocab words into a super structured visual guide. It's going to make study not just efficient, but actually make this material stick for both of us. Let's get into it.
So here's the reality. With just one class left before the Regents exam, the stakes are pretty high, and it's completely normal to feel that pre-test adrenaline kicking in right about now. But hey, don't let the countdown stress you out. Let it focus you. We are going to go through everything you need, step by step. By the time we wrap up this explainer, you're going to be 100% test ready, I promise.
Okay, let's look at our foolproof study session roadmap. 1. Exam strategy and setup. 2. US versus USSR ideologies. 3. Containment in action. 4. Red Scare and McCarthyism. And 5. Timeline and a quick pop quiz.
Section 1. Exam Strategy and Setup. Test Day Tactics.
Before we hit the heavy history facts, we really need a solid game plan. Here are the essential study strategies I'm using to attack this test. First up, we've got to prioritize high-frequency topics. The Cold War is heavily tested, so choosing to review this explainer right now, highly strategic on your part. Content aside though, remember the human element. You want to study in short, 30 to 45-minute blocks. Please do not cram. Make sure you actually sleep, eat something, stay hydrated, and leave home early on exam day. Trust me, sprinting into the exam room covered in sweat is definitely not how we want to start.
And this brilliantly illustrates our attack plan for the multiple choice section. It's super simple. You want to read and annotate the stimulus quickly. Look at the question first, then check out the choices and eliminate the clearly wrong answers, just to boost your odds. But most importantly, watch out for trick words. Whenever you see accept or not in a question, underline them immediately. Test makers literally love to throw those in just to see if we're paying close attention.
Moving right along to Section 2. US versus USSR ideologies. The global clash. Let's set up the foundational conflict of this entire unit. The Cold War wasn't just some minor disagreement, you know? It was a fundamental clash over how society should even exist. After World War II, the US and the USSR emerged as the world's two major superpowers, and they were polar opposites. The United States supported democracy and capitalism, meaning citizens vote and property is privately owned. On the flip side, the Soviet Union promoted dictatorship and communism, where the government controls all property and resources. This deep, completely unresolvable ideological clash over government and property, that is exactly what drove this hostile, decades-long rivalry.
All right, Section 3. Containment, Policy, and Action. Stopping communism.
Now we are moving into what is arguably the most heavily tested bucket of the entire unit, how the US actually fought back without sparking a direct, world-ending war. Here are your absolutely essential vocabulary words. Number 1, the Cold War itself, that tense period from 1947 to 1991. Number 2, the Iron Curtain, the political boundary dividing the Free West from the Communist East. But I really want you to lock in on number 3, containment. You need to treat this word as the golden key to unlocking this exam.
Let's define it nice and clearly. Containment was the foundational U.S. policy aimed at stopping the spread of communism around the world. So the crucial point is this. Anytime you're taking a multiple-choice test and the question asks about early Cold War foreign policy or the primary goal of a specific U.S. action in the 50s and 60s, if an answer choice says stopping the spread of communism or containment, it is almost always the correct answer. Write that down. So, how did containment actually work in the real world? Well, the U.S. basically used money and supplies as weapons. First up, the Truman Doctrine in 1947. The U.S. gave direct military and economic aid to Greece and Turkey, specifically to help them resist communism. That very same year, we get the Marshall Plan. This pumped billions of dollars into rebuilding Western Europe's ruined economy simply so communist revolutions wouldn't look appealing to people there. And then the Berlin Airlift in 1948. When the Soviets blockaded West Berlin to force the Allies out, the U.S. didn't shoot. Instead, they flew food and supplies right over the blockade for almost an entire year. Eventually, this massive standoff crystallized into formal alliances. This right here is a crucial mental screenshot for those matching questions. On one side, led by the United States, you've got NATO. That's a military alliance of Western countries formed in 1949. In direct response to that, led by the Soviet Union, you have the Warsaw Pact, a military alliance of communist satellite states. And much later on, as part of a period of easing tensions, the US and USSR signed SALT I.
This was an agreement specifically designed to limit the massive amount of nuclear weapons both sides were frantically hoarding.
Section 4. Red Scare and McCarthyism. Fear at home.
We've been talking a lot about foreign policy, right? But the fear of communism definitely didn't just stay overseas. It deeply infected American society. And that brings us to another highly testable vocabulary term, McCarthyism, named after Senator Joseph McCarthy. This was the intense practice of accusing government officials and even everyday citizens of being communists with little to absolutely zero evidence. It was just an era of incredibly aggressive, paranoid investigations.
McCarthyism fits directly into the broader global picture. See, while the US and USSR were fighting proxy wars, like the conflicts in Korea and Vietnam, where they backed other groups instead of battling each other directly, back at home, America was going through the second Red Scare. And the absolute defining feature of this scare at home was the severe violation of basic civil liberties. The effects of this paranoia were honestly devastating, and they completely ruined lives. There was this widespread, suffocating fear everywhere. People were literally forced to take loyalty oaths just to keep their everyday jobs. Blacklists were drawn up targeting suspected communists, especially in the government, in public schools, and notoriously in the Hollywood media industry. Basically, if your name ended up on one of those blacklists, your career was effectively over, and often without any solid proof against you at all.
Section 5. Timeline and Pop Quiz. Time to test your knowledge. Okay, you've made it to the final section. Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds across the decades to simulate the exam. We start in 1945 with the Yalta and Potsdam conferences, which is exactly where the post-war disagreements started brewing. Then things get hot in 1950 with the outbreak of the Korean War. We hit absolute peak danger in 1962 with the Cuban Missile Crisis. By 1973, intense pushback against the Vietnam War leads to the War Powers Resolution. And finally, the Great Thawing. In 1989, the Berlin Wall falls, and in 1991, the Soviet Union completely collapses. Just like that, the Cold War is over.
All right, it is pop quiz time. I'm going to pose the question directly to you, and I want you to give yourself a beat to search your memory before I reveal the answer. Question 1. What major 1957 event sparked American fears of falling behind in technology and officially launched the space race? Think about the arms race escalating here.
And the answer is Sputnik. The Soviet Union successfully launched the very first satellite into space. This completely and utterly shocked the American public and the government. It created this massive, urgent push to upgrade science and technology education all across the United States.
Moving on to the absolute climax of Cold War tension. Now, what's really interesting about this next event is just how close things got. Pop Quiz 2. In 1962, the U.S. discovered Soviet nuclear missiles placed a mere 90 miles from the coast of Florida. What was this incredibly dangerous turning point called?
The answer is the Cuban Missile Crisis. This event is widely considered to be the closest the world has ever come to actual global nuclear war. President Kennedy demanded the missiles be removed and ordered a naval blockade. It was a terrifying 13-day standoff that ultimately ended in a compromise. The Soviets removed their missiles, and the U.S. promised not to overthrow communist leader Fidel Castro by invading Cuba.
Here is your final test question. We are shifting to the domestic pushback later in the Cold War. Pop Quiz 3. Public trust severely fell during the Vietnam War, especially after the release of the secret Pentagon Papers. What 1973 law was passed by Congress to specifically limit the president's power to send troops into conflict without congressional approval?
The answer is the War Powers Resolution. It's an incredibly important piece of legislation checking executive power. Well, congratulations! You've made it through the ultimate Cold War review, and you are officially 100% prepped for this exam. But before we go, I really want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. As you look at the news today, considering all our modern global tensions, how much does the historical legacy of containment still dictate how world superpowers interact right now? Good luck on your test, and keep asking those big questions.